With $60 million in our account, you're nothing but dead weight. Get out of here." My daughter-in-law Christine's words hung in the air like poison as she threw my clothes into a suitcase, her manicured nails ripping through the fabric of my favorite blouse in her frenzy. Her face, usually carefully composed into a mask of polite tolerance whenever David was around, had transformed into something unrecognizable, raw with a greed and hatred I'd suspected but never witnessed so nakedly before. "Christine, please," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. At 67, I never imagined I'd be watching my son's wife of 3 years literally throwing me out of their home. "Let's all sit down and talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about, Lorelei." She spat my name like it tasted bitter on her tongue. "We're millionaires now. We don't need you cluttering up our guest room anymore. We'll be buying a mansion with staff quarters. If you're lucky, maybe we'll hire you as the maid." She laughed at her own cruelty, a sound like breaking glass. My son David stood in the doorway, his face a battlefield of emotions, shock at his wife's behavior, warring with the intoxicating promise of sudden wealth. I searched his eyes for the little boy who once crawled into my lap during thunderstorms, the teenager who brought me breakfast in bed every Mother's Day, the man who'd insisted I move in with them when I sold my house to help with their down payment. "Mom," he finally said, his voice strained, "maybe Christine has a point. With this kind of money, we could set you up somewhere really nice, one of those luxury senior communities with activities and health care." My heart cracked along fault lines I didn't know existed. My own son, choosing money over me, choosing his wife's cruelty over his mother's love. "You'd put me in a home?" I whispered. "A high-end residence," Christine corrected with a dismissive wave. "Not that we owe you anything. It's our ticket, our money." She gestured to the lottery ticket on the kitchen counter, the one I'd bought them as part of our family tradition, the one she'd mocked as a waste of money from a naive old woman just yesterday. What Christine didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I'd checked both tickets last night after they'd gone to bed. I knew exactly what each ticket was worth. I could have spoken then, revealed the truth immediately. But something held me back. Perhaps it was the lifetime of wisdom that comes from raising children alone after being widowed young. Perhaps it was simple self-preservation. Or perhaps it was the quiet voice inside that whispered, "Let them show you who they really are when they think they don't need you anymore." So I watched in silence as Christine continued emptying my drawers, her movements growing more frantic, more violent with each passing minute. I watched my son's weak protests die on his lips as she outlined their future of luxury and excess. "I've already called the locksmith," Christine announced, zipping the overstuffed suitcase. "He'll be here this afternoon to change the locks. You need to be gone by then." "You're changing the locks on my mother?" David asked, finally showing a spine, however tentative. "Our mother," Christine corrected with a saccharine smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Who needs her own space to enjoy her golden years while we enjoy our windfall? It's for the best, honey." As she dragged my suitcase toward the front door, I followed silently, a strange calm settling over me. Sometimes the universe hands you clarity in the most unexpected packages. This morning, mine had come wrapped in betrayal and 60 million reasons for truth. At the doorway, Christine practically shoved me onto the porch, the suitcase tumbling down the 3 steps to the walkway. My knitting needles and half-finished scarf spilled onto the concrete. "Christine!" David called out, horrified, but still not intervening effectively. It was time. I turned to face them, standing straighter than I had in years. "Before I go," I said quietly, "there's something you should know." "Save your guilt trip," Christine snapped. "We don't need to hear—" "The winning ticket," I interrupted, my voice growing stronger, "is actually the one in my name, dear. The one in your name's won $500. Their expressions froze, then crumbled in real time. Christine's smug superiority shattering into disbelief, David's conflicted face draining of color. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, turning the screen to show them the lottery website I'd checked repeatedly through a sleepless night. "What?" Christine whispered, her voice suddenly small. "That's not possible." "See for yourself," I said, pointing to the tickets still on their counter. "Check the numbers carefully this time." As the truth dawned on them, I felt no triumph, no vindication, just a profound sadness that it had taken $60 million to reveal what had been hiding beneath the surface all along. I picked up my suitcase, collecting my scattered knitting supplies with as much dignity as I could muster. "I'll be at the Holiday Inn downtown until I figure out my next steps," I said, my voice remarkably steady. "David, you can reach me on my cell if you need to talk." As I walked toward the waiting Uber I'd quietly called, while Christine was ransacking my room, I heard her wail of rage and despair behind me. I didn't look back. Some views are better left in the rearview mirror. $60 million richer, and in some ways, immeasurably poorer. I had lost the illusion of my son's unconditional love, but gained something perhaps more valuable in the long run, the unvarnished truth. And truth, unlike family, never betrays you. The Holiday Inn room felt both alien and familiar, the generic furnishings reminiscent of countless family vacations when David was young, yet now tinged with the bitter knowledge that I was essentially homeless at 67. I placed my hastily packed suitcase on the luggage rack and sat heavily on the edge of the bed, the events of the morning replaying in an endless, painful loop. My phone had been buzzing non-stop since I left the house. 14 missed calls from David, 3 voicemails, a flurry of text messages ranging from desperate pleas to return to thinly veiled attempts to backpedal now that the financial tables had turned. "Mom, please come home. We need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding." Christine didn't mean what she said. "We're family. We can work this out. Family." The word sat like a stone in my chest. For 35 years, I'd defined myself primarily as David's mother. After Frank died of a heart attack when David was just 7, I'd worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, postponed my own dreams, centered my existence around giving my son every opportunity I could manage. When Elaine came along 5 years later, my surprise blessing in the midst of widowhood, I'd stretched myself even thinner to be everything for both of them. Now Elaine was across the country saving lives as a trauma surgeon, too busy to call more than once a month. And David had stood by while his wife threw me out like yesterday's garbage, had actually suggested a luxury senior community as if warehousing me out of sight would salve his conscience. A knock at the door startled me from my thoughts. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole to find David standing in the hallway, his face haggard. "Mom?" His voice came muffled through the door. "Please, can we talk?" Part of me wanted to ignore him, to let him stew in the consequences of his inaction. But decades of maternal instinct don't evaporate in a single morning, no matter how painful. I opened the door, but didn't step aside to let him in. "How did you find me?" I asked. "I called every hotel downtown until I found you." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that my heart twisted despite everything. "Mom, I'm so sorry. What Christine did, what I let happen, it's unforgivable. Yet, here you are, seeking forgiveness," I observed, finally stepping back to allow him entry. He paced the small room, unable to meet my eyes directly. "Christine's hysterical. She checked the ticket and realized you were telling the truth. She's been alternating between sobbing and raging for hours. And you?" I asked, folding my arms across my chest. "Are you here because you're genuinely sorry, or because you've realized what side your bread is buttered on now?" The bluntness of my question seemed to physically strike him. David had never heard me speak this way. I'd always been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed things over, who sacrificed to keep harmony. "That's not fair," he started, then stopped himself. "No, you're right to ask that. I failed you today, Mom. Failed you in the worst possible way." His voice broke. "I have no excuse." "No, you don't," I agreed, surprising myself with my steadiness. "I sold my home, the home where you grew up, where every corner held memories of your father, to help you and Christine buy your house. I've cooked your meals, done your laundry, babied your wife even when she could barely hide her contempt for me. And at the first opportunity, you both discarded me like a burden you'd been forced to bear." David sank onto the edge of the bed, head in his hands. "I don't know what happened to me. When Christine started talking about millions of dollars, it was like I went temporarily insane, like all my values, everything you taught me just evaporated. Money doesn't change people, David. It reveals them." "What can I do?" he asked, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "How do I make this right?" I considered his question carefully. The easy answer would be to tell him what he wanted to hear, that all was forgiven, that we'd move forward as if this morning never happened. That's what the old Lorelei would have done. Absorbed the hurt, prioritized peace, diminished herself to make others comfortable. but the woman who had watched her daughter-in-law's mask slip completely, who had seen her son's character crumble in the face of temptation, who now held a $60 million winning lottery ticket in her purse, that woman deserved better. "I don't know if you can make this right, David," I said finally. "Some bells can't be unrung. What I do know is that I won't be returning to your home. Not today, not ever." "Mom, I need time," I continued, holding up a hand to stop his protest. "Time to process what happened. Time to figure out what my life looks like now, with or without you in it." The gravity of my words hung between us. In all his life, I had never once suggested that our relationship was anything but permanent and unconditional. "You'd cut me out of your life?" he whispered, aghast. "I didn't throw myself out of my home," I reminded him. "I didn't suggest sending my mother to a facility when I thought I had millions. Those were your choices, David. And choices have consequences." He seemed to physically shrink before my eyes. "What about the money?" he asked, then immediately flushed with shame at the question. "Ah," I said softly, "so we get to the heart of it." "That's not what I meant," he backpedaled. "I don't want your money, Mom, I swear." "Good," I replied simply, "because I don't intend to give you any." His face registered shock, not at the refusal, but at my directness. The mother he knew would have immediately offered to share her good fortune, would have put his needs first, as she always had. "I should go," he said finally, standing. "Christine's waiting in the car. She wanted to come up too, but I thought it might be better if I talked to you alone first." "You thought correctly," I said. The idea of facing Christine's insincere apologies and calculated tears was more than I could bear at the moment. "Please tell your wife I'm not ready to speak with her." At the door, David turned back, his expression lost. "What happens now?" I looked at my son. This man I'd raised alone, had poured every ounce of love and sacrifice into, and felt a curious mixture of heartbreak and liberation. "Now," I said, "I claim the life I've put on hold for others. I suggest you do some serious reflection on the man you want to be, with or without $60 million in the equation." After he left, I sat in the quiet hotel room, staring at the winning ticket that had simultaneously destroyed and liberated my life in the span of a single morning. Tomorrow, I would contact a lawyer, a financial advisor, figure out how to claim such an enormous sum. Tonight, I would allow myself to grieve, not for the money gained, but for the illusions lost. My phone buzzed with a text from Elaine. "Annual checkup reminder for you, Mom. Don't forget to schedule." My daughter, unaware that her mother's world had just imploded and reconstructed itself in the space of a few hours. I hadn't called her yet, uncertain how to explain what had happened, what I had discovered about the brother she'd always idolized. Some revelations change everything. Some truths can't be unlearned, and some windfalls carry the highest price of all. 3 days passed in a blur of practical necessities and emotional aftershocks. I found a modest extended-stay hotel with a kitchenette, contacted a highly recommended attorney specializing in lottery winners, and made an appointment with a financial advisor who had experience handling sudden wealth. Through it all, my phone continued to erupt with messages from David and, increasingly, from Christine. David's messages grew increasingly desperate. "Mom, please just talk to me. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please give me a chance. Christine is beside herself. We both are. We made a terrible mistake." Christine's messages evolved from tearful apologies to thinly veiled attempts at reconciliation that invariably circled back to the money. "Lorelai, I was under so much stress. I said things I didn't mean. We're family. Family forgives. David and I always plan to share anything we won with you. I hope you'll do the same." I responded to neither, focusing instead on the practical steps of claiming my windfall while maintaining as much privacy as the Lottery Commission would allow. My attorney, Ms. Harrington, had been blunt. "The good news is you can claim through a trust to maintain some anonymity," she explained during our first meeting. "The bad news is that money changes relationships irrevocably, often bringing out the worst in people." "I've already seen that firsthand," I replied, briefly explaining the situation with David and Christine. She nodded, unsurprised. "Unfortunately, that's common. I strongly recommend changing your phone number immediately and being extremely cautious about who you tell about your winnings." It was on the 4th day, as I was signing the final paperwork to establish the trust that would claim my winnings, that my phone rang with Elaine's number. "Mom?" Her voice sounded strained. "What the hell is going on?" David just called me crying, saying you've won the lottery and are cutting everyone out of your life. Christine called right after claiming you're having some kind of breakdown. Are you okay? I sighed, settling onto the edge of the hotel bed. I'm fine, Elaine. Better than fine in some ways, worse in others. It's complicated. Start from the beginning, she instructed, her doctor's voice taking over, calm, authoritative, leaving no room for evasion. So I did. I told her about the lottery tickets, about Christine's explosive reaction when she thought they'd won, about David's failure to defend me, about the revelation of the true winning ticket. That absolute bitch, Elaine breathed when I finished. And David, I can't believe he just stood there while she threw you out. What the hell happened to my brother? Money, I said simply. Or the promise of it anyway. I'm coming home, she declared immediately. I'll book a flight tonight. You don't need to do that, I protested. You have patients who need you. My mother needs me, she countered firmly, and apparently my brother needs his ass kicked. I'll be there tomorrow. After we hung up, I sat staring at the phone, feeling simultaneously relieved and anxious. Elaine had always been the firebrand of the family, passionate, outspoken, fiercely protective. Her reaction was no surprise, but her intervention would inevitably escalate a situation I was still trying to process. My contemplation was interrupted by a knock at my hotel room door. Wary after the events of the past few days, I approached cautiously and peered through the peephole. Christine stood in the hallway, clutching an enormous bouquet of flowers, her face carefully made up but bearing the unmistakable puffiness of recent tears. My first instinct was to ignore her, to pretend I wasn't there. But some combination of curiosity and a lifetime of confrontation avoidance led me to open the door partway, keeping the security chain engaged. "Lorelei," she breathed, her voice trembling with what I now recognized as practiced emotion. "Thank goodness. I've been so worried." "How did you find me?" I asked, echoing the question I'd asked David days earlier. "I called every hotel in the city," she said, attempting to push the flowers through the partially open door. "Please, can we talk? I am so sorry about what happened." I made no move to take the flowers or remove the chain. "Christine, I'm not ready to speak with you yet. Please," she implored, tears welling in her eyes right on cue. "What I did was horrible. I don't know what came over me. It was like I became another person for a moment." "It wasn't another person," I said quietly. "It was you without the mask you've worn for 3 years, and now I've seen what's underneath." Her expression flickered, a momentary hardening before the contrite mask slipped back into place. "People say terrible things they don't mean when they're excited or stressed. You know I love you like my own mother." The blatant lie hung in the air between us. For 3 years, Christine had barely tolerated my presence, had made countless subtle digs about my clothing, my cooking, my outdated opinions. She'd excluded me from outings, forgotten to set a place for me at dinner when David worked late, rearranged my belongings when I wasn't looking. Small cruelties designed to make me feel unwelcome without being obvious enough for David to notice. "Christine," I said, surprising myself with my calmness, "we both know that's not true. You've resented my presence from day one. That's not—" "It is," I interrupted gently, "and that would have been your right if you'd been honest about it. But instead, you pretended while secretly undermining me at every turn. And when you thought you had the financial means to discard me without consequences, you showed your true feelings rather spectacularly." Her facade cracked slightly, irritation bleeding through. "So you're punishing us? Using your lucky ticket to get revenge? Is that why you're here?" I asked. "Because you think I'm punishing you by not sharing my winnings?" She flushed. "Of course not. I'm here because we're family, and families forgive each other. Families also don't throw each other out on the street," I pointed out, "or call elderly parents dead weight." Christine's expression hardened fully now, the mask dropping entirely. "Look, we both know this is about the money. You hit the jackpot by pure dumb luck, and now you're holding it over our heads. That's not fair." "Life rarely is," I agreed, as I discovered when my daughter-in-law packed my belongings while telling me she was finally free of pretending to want me around. Her eyes narrowed. "So that's it? You're going to punish David too? Cut off your own son because of something I did?" "David made his own choices," I said, "and now I'm making mine." "You won't get away with this," she hissed, her composed demeanor completely evaporated. "David deserves half that money. We deserve it." Deserve is a dangerous word, Christine, I replied, closing the door gently but firmly in her face. Through the wood, I heard her final shot. You'll regret this, Lorelei. Nobody turns their back on family without consequences. I leaned against the closed door, heart pounding despite my outward calm. The flowers she'd brought lay scattered in the hallway where they'd fallen when I shut the door. Beautiful, expensive, and completely hollow, just like the relationship she'd pretended to cultivate all these years. My phone buzzed with a text from Elaine. Flight booked. Arriving 11:30 tomorrow. We'll figure this out together. Love you, Mom. At least one of my children still remembered the meaning of that word. Elaine arrived like a force of nature, striding through the airport terminal with the purposeful energy that had propelled her through medical school and into her position as one of the youngest trauma surgeons at San Francisco General. She spotted me waiting near baggage claim and made a beeline in my direction, her carry-on rolling behind her. "Mom," she said, wrapping me in a fierce hug that smelled of airplane disinfectant and her signature jasmine perfume. She pulled back, eyes scanning me professionally. "You look exhausted. Are you sleeping?" "Hello to you too," I replied with a small smile. "And yes, I'm sleeping. Some. It's been an eventful week. That's the understatement of the century." She looped her arm through mine as we walked toward the exit. $60 million and family betrayal all in one morning. You win the prize for most dramatic life change, hands down. That was Elaine, direct, sometimes bracingly so, but never with malice. Where David had inherited his father's gentle manner and conflict avoidance, Elaine had apparently absorbed all the assertiveness genes in the family pool. In the taxi to my hotel, I filled her in on the latest developments. Christine's visit, the meeting with the financial advisor, the trust being established to claim the winnings. "So let me get this straight," Elaine said, her brow furrowed. "Christine actually showed up at your hotel room expecting what exactly? That you'd hand over a chunk of your winnings after she literally threw you out of their house?" "I think in her mind she was making amends," I replied. "She brought flowers." Elaine snorted. "Flowers? For treating you like garbage and calling you dead weight? How generous." "She's panicking," I said. "They both are. The reality of what happened, what they did, is sinking in, and they're scrambling to undo it. Because of the money," Elaine stated flatly. I sighed, watching the familiar cityscape pass by the taxi window. "Not entirely. I think David is genuinely horrified by his behavior, by what it revealed about his character. But yes, the money is a significant factor. $60 million has a way of clarifying priorities." At the hotel, Elaine insisted on ordering room service rather than going out. "You need rest, not restaurant chaos," she declared, her doctor voice brooking no argument. As we ate overpriced club sandwiches and shared a bottle of mediocre Pinot Grigio, she studied me with the same intense focus she'd had since childhood. "You're different," she finally said. "There's something, I don't know, steelier about you. Having your son stand by while his wife packs your belongings will do that to a person," I replied dryly. "No, it's more than that." She leaned forward. "You're not making excuses for them. The old you would have been tying yourself in knots trying to see their side, blaming yourself for being a burden." Her observation struck home. She was right. The Lorelei of a week ago would have been desperately searching for ways to mend fences, to smooth things over, to restore harmony at any cost, including her own dignity. "I guess I've run out of excuses to make," I said softly. "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." "Maya Angelou," Elaine nodded approvingly. "So what now? What do you want, Mom? Not what's best for David, not what's easiest for everyone else. What do you want?" The question caught me off guard. What did I want? For so long, my wants had been secondary, first to raising my children alone after Frank died, then to helping David and Christine with their home, then to being the unobtrusive, helpful mother-in-law who never complained about Christine's thinly veiled hostility. I began, then stopped, surprised by the emotion welling in my throat. I want to matter, not as David's mother or Frank's widow or anyone's anything, just as myself. Elaine reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then that's where we start. The next morning brought another development. David arrived at the hotel lobby, calling up to request permission to speak with us. Elaine wanted to refuse him outright, but I felt he deserved at least one conversation. "I can handle this," I assured her, "and you'll be right there with me." When he arrived at our room, David looked like he'd aged 5 years in 5 days. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing the same rumpled Stanford sweatshirt he'd retreated to during finals weeks in college. "Mom," he began, then noticed Elaine. His face registered shock, then wariness. "Elaine? What are you doing here?" "Supporting our mother after her son failed catastrophically at that job," she replied coolly. "Come in, David. Say what you came to say." He entered cautiously, as if expecting physical confrontation. Given Elaine's expression, it wasn't an unreasonable fear. "I filed for separation," he said without preamble. "From Christine. I'm staying at Mark's place for now." This was unexpected. "Why?" I asked. "Because I can't be married to someone who would treat you that way," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Because every time I look at her, I remember how she packed your things while saying those horrible things, and how I just stood there." "And the money has nothing to do with your decision?" Elaine asked skeptically. David flinched. "I deserve that. But no, this isn't about the lottery. This is about who Christine really is, who we both showed ourselves to be in that moment." He looked directly at me. "I'll never forgive myself for failing you, Mom. Never. Forgiveness isn't the issue right now," I said carefully. "Trust is. You broke something fundamental between us, David. Something that can't be fixed with apologies or grand gestures." "I know," he whispered. "I know that. I'm not asking for forgiveness or any of your money. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to make changes. Real ones. Filing for separation is a start," Elaine acknowledged, her tone marginally less frigid. "But it doesn't undo what happened." "Nothing can," he agreed. I miss my mom. I miss the person I thought I was, someone who would never let anyone hurt you." The naked vulnerability in his expression pierced through some of my defensive armor. This was still my son, the little boy I'd raised alone, the teenager who'd worked after school to help with bills when money was tight, the young man who'd always called faithfully every Sunday during college. "It's going to take time," I said finally. "A lot of time." He nodded, accepting this without protest. "I understand. I just wanted you to know about Christine, and to say again how sorry I am." He stood awkwardly. "I should go. Let you and Elaine have your time together." After he left, Elaine examined my face carefully. "You're softening toward him." "He's my son," I said simply. "That doesn't disappear because he made a terrible mistake." "A mistake is forgetting your keys," Elaine countered. "He watched his wife throw you out of your home and suggested a senior living facility instead of defending you." "I know what he did," I replied quietly. "I was there, remember? But I also raised him for 35 years. I know who he is beyond this one awful moment." Elaine sighed, some of her righteous anger deflating. "I just don't want to see you hurt again, especially not by someone who should protect you at all costs." "I'm not rushing into forgiveness," I assured her. "But I'm leaving the door cracked open for the possibility someday. That's all." Later that evening, as we planned our next steps, finding me a more permanent living situation, scheduling the official lottery claim, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Mrs. Thornton?" a female voice asked when I answered. "This is Rebecca Wilson from Channel 9 News. We understand you're the winner of last week's $60 million Powerball jackpot. We'd love to schedule an interview." I hung up immediately, heart pounding. How did they get my number? How do they know it was me? Elaine's expression darkened. "I can think of 2 possibilities, and both of them live in the house you were thrown out of." The lottery ticket that had revealed Christine's true nature was now threatening what little privacy I had left. The windfall that should have brought security was bringing complications I'd never imagined. Money reveals people indeed, sometimes in ways you never wanted to see. "We need to move you immediately," Elaine declared, already throwing my belongings into the suitcase I'd barely unpacked. "Once your name gets out, every reporter, distant relative, and scammer in a 5-state radius will be hunting you down." My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Then another. Within minutes, my voicemail was full. My text messages overflowing with inquiries from news outlets, financial advisors offering their services, and even several messages from people claiming to be long-lost relatives. "How did this happen?" I asked, watching helplessly as my privacy evaporated in real time. The trust wasn't even finalized yet. The Lottery Commission shouldn't have released my name. "They didn't," Elaine said grimly, scrolling through her own phone. "Look." She held up her screen to show a local news website's homepage. There, in glaring headlines, Local grandmother wins $60 million jackpot after family dispute. Below was a photo of me, one from David and Christine's wedding 3 years ago, my face captured mid-laugh as I adjusted David's boutonniere. "How did they get that picture?" I whispered, a cold dread settling in my stomach. That was on Christine's Instagram account. Elaine's expression hardened as she scrolled further down the article. Sources close to the family report that Lorelei Thornton, 67, purchased 2 lottery tickets as part of a family tradition, one for herself and one for her son and daughter-in-law. In a twist of fate, both tickets won, with Thornton's ticket claiming the $60 million jackpot while her son's ticket won a modest $500. She looked up, eyes blazing. "They're quoting a source close to the family, Mom." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Someone had sold my story to the press, someone who knew intimate details about the lottery tickets, about our family tradition. "Christine," I said, the name bitter on my tongue. "It has to be." "Or David," Elaine suggested, though she seemed reluctant to voice the possibility. "No," I shook my head firmly. "Whatever his failings, David wouldn't do this. This has Christine written all over it." My phone rang again, this time with David's number. I answered on speaker so Elaine could hear. "Mom!" His voice was panicked. "Have you seen the news? Someone talked to the press about the lottery." "We've seen it," I replied tersely. "Your wife busy making some extra cash by selling my story?" "It wasn't Christine," he said immediately. "At least I don't think it was. She's been acting strange since I told her about filing for separation, alternating between begging me to reconsider and raging about how unfair everything is. But she seemed as shocked as I was when the story broke." "Then who?" Elaine demanded, leaning toward the phone. "Who else knew all these details?" There was a pause. "I might have talked to Mark about it. When I first moved to his place, I was pretty messed up that night, had a few too many beers, and spilled the entire story to your college buddy who just happens to be married to a reporter at Channel 7. Elaine finished, her voice dripping with disgust. "Brilliant, David. Just brilliant. I didn't think he'd tell Jessica. They're having problems. I thought our conversation was private, man to man." "Well, clearly it wasn't," I interjected, trying to focus on practical matters rather than this fresh betrayal. "And now we have to deal with the consequences. I need to get out of this hotel before reporters start camping in the lobby." "You can stay with me," David offered immediately. "I'm at Mark's, but I could easily—" "Absolutely not," Elaine cut him off. "She's coming with me to California. Tonight." The decisiveness in her voice brooked no argument, but I found myself hesitating. "Elaine, your condo barely has room for you, let alone a house guest, and your schedule at the hospital is flexible for family emergencies," she finished firmly. "I've already texted my department head. I've got 2 weeks of accumulated vacation time they've been begging me to take. You're coming to San Francisco until this dies down, and we can figure out next steps." David's voice came through the speaker, small and defeated. "That's probably for the best. I'm so sorry, Mom, for everything." After we hung up, Elaine resumed packing with military efficiency. "I've booked us on the red-eye. We leave in 4 hours." I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the rapid disintegration of my life. In just 1 week, I'd gone from a comfortably invisible mother-in-law to a homeless lottery winner fleeing media attention, betrayed by my son and despised by my daughter-in-law. "Hey," Elaine's voice softened as she noticed my expression. "We'll figure this out. The press will move on to the next sensation, and you'll be able to claim your winnings through the trust with minimal publicity. This is just a temporary storm." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hope you enjoy your blood money, you manipulative old witch. You planned this from the start, didn't you? Buying 2 tickets, knowing one would win? Now you've turned my husband against me and destroyed our marriage. I won't forget this. See." I wordlessly handed the phone to Elaine, whose eyes widened as she read Christine's message. "She's unhinged," Elaine muttered, "and potentially dangerous. We're definitely getting you out of town tonight." As we finished packing, my phone continued to explode with notifications, more press inquiries, more financial advisors, more supposed distant relatives, and among them, 5 more increasingly unhinged messages from Christine, each more accusatory than the last. "She thinks I somehow engineered the lottery win," I said incredulously, reading her latest tirade. "As if I have magical powers to select winning numbers. She's looking for someone to blame," Elaine observed, zipping my suitcase closed. In her warped reality, she's the victim here, not the villain. And now that David's left her, she's lost her primary target for manipulation. I never wanted any of this, I said softly. The money, the media attention, David's marriage falling apart. I just wanted to be treated with basic dignity. Elaine paused in her efficient packing to sit beside me, taking my hand in hers. That's because you're a good person, Mom. Better than all of us, honestly. You've spent your whole life putting everyone else first. Maybe this lottery win, as messy as it's becoming, is the universe's way of forcing you to finally put yourself first. As we prepared to leave for the airport, a final text came through. This one from David. Christine just left the house with a suitcase, raving about making things right and showing everyone the truth. I don't know what she's planning, but be careful, Mom. She's not stable right now. A chill ran down my spine. Christine had always been controlled, calculating in her hostility toward me. The idea of her becoming unpredictable, potentially violent, added a new dimension of fear to an already overwhelming situation. Don't respond, Elaine advised, reading over my shoulder. Let's just get to the airport and out of this city. We can deal with Christine's dramatics from 3,000 miles away. In the taxi to the airport, I gazed out at the city lights, the skyline I'd called home for 40 years, since Frank and I bought our first small house as newlyweds. I'd never imagined leaving, certainly not like this, fleeing in the night from media attention, and a vengeful daughter-in-law, my relationship with my son hanging by a thread. $60 million. The sum that was supposed to bring security and comfort had instead unleashed chaos and revealed the brittle foundations of relationships I'd thought were solid. Stop looking so grim, Elaine nudged me gently. This isn't an ending, Mom. It's a beginning. A weird, messy beginning. But still, for the first time in decades, you get to decide what your life looks like, on your terms, with your priorities. As the taxi merged onto the highway toward the airport, I allowed myself to consider the possibility that she might be right, that somewhere beyond the current turmoil might lie a life I'd never dared imagine for myself, one where Lorelei Thornton existed as more than just someone's mother, someone's mother-in-law, someone's widow, one where I finally, truly mattered as myself. San Francisco greeted us with fog and a gentle mist that seemed to blur the sharp edges of the world I'd left behind. Elaine's condo perched on a hillside in No Valley, small but with staggering views of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows, modern, minimalist, and distinctly child-free, a stark contrast to the family homes I'd occupied my entire adult life. It's not much, Elaine apologized, showing me to her spare room, which functioned primarily as a home office. But the sofa pulls out, and no one will think to look for you here. It's perfect, I assured her, too exhausted from the overnight flight and emotional upheaval to care about accommodations. Thank you for doing this. Stop thanking me, she said firmly. You raised me alone after Dad died. You worked 2 jobs to put me through undergrad. You supported me through the med school years when I was too sleep-deprived to remember my own name. I think I can handle providing a safe haven for a few weeks. That first day passed in a blur of necessary phone calls. To Ms. Harrington about moving forward with the trust despite the media leak. To my bank about securing my accounts against potential fraud. To the few close friends back home who might worry about my sudden disappearance. I changed my phone number, created new email addresses, and began the process of digitally disappearing as thoroughly as possible. By evening, exhaustion claimed me, and I fell into dreamless sleep on Elaine's pull-out sofa, lulled by the unfamiliar city sounds floating through the partially open window. I awoke the next morning to the smell of coffee and the sound of Elaine's voice, low and intense, coming from the kitchen. Padding quietly down the hallway, I paused at the threshold, not wanting to interrupt what sounded like a serious conversation. I don't care what she's saying, David. Mom didn't steal anything from anyone. No, I'm not going to tell you where we are right now. Because your wife is acting like a lunatic, that's why. I stepped into the kitchen, making my presence known. Elaine glanced up, phone pressed to her ear, and rolled her eyes dramatically. She's here now. Do you want to speak with her? A pause. Fine, but keep it brief. She needs rest, not more drama. She handed me the phone with a warning look. David? I said. Accepting both the phone and the mug of coffee, Elaine slid across the counter to me. Mom, thank God. His voice sounded ragged. Are you okay? Safe? I'm fine, I assured him. What's happening there? He exhaled heavily. It's not good. Christine's gone nuclear. She did an interview with Channel 9 yesterday, claiming you manipulated the whole lottery situation to break up our marriage. Said you've been jealous of her from day one and used the winning ticket to drive a wedge between us. That's absurd, I said, though nothing about Christine's behavior surprised me anymore. Of course it is. But she's convincing when she cries on camera. She's painting herself as the devastated young wife abandoned by her husband because his manipulative mother won the lottery. And people are believing this? I asked incredulously. Some are. Mostly people who don't know you. He paused. She's also filed a legal claim against your lottery winnings. The coffee mug nearly slipped from my hand. She's what? Her lawyer. And yes, she somehow found a lawyer willing to take this case, is arguing that since the tradition of buying lottery tickets was a family compact, all winnings should be considered shared family assets. It's completely bogus according to Mark's friend who practices family law, but it could tie things up in court for a while. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Just when I thought the situation couldn't become more bizarre, Christine had found a way to escalate further. Mom? Are you still there? I'm here, I said faintly. Just processing. I'm so sorry, David said, his voice cracking. This is all my fault. If I hadn't told Mark about the lottery, if I'd stood up to Christine when she was throwing you out, if, I interrupted gently. We can't change what happened, David. We can only deal with what is. After finishing the call with promises to stay in touch securely through Elaine, I sank onto a kitchen stool, suddenly feeling every one of my 67 years. Christine is suing me for my lottery winnings, I told Elaine, who had been hovering nearby, trying to pretend she wasn't eavesdropping. And she did a televised interview painting me as some kind of manipulative monster. That vindictive little... Elaine bit off the rest of her sentence. Okay, deep breaths. This changes nothing. Ms. Harrington needs to know about the lawsuit immediately, but otherwise, our plan remains the same. You stay here, out of the spotlight, while the legal team handles things back home. The next 2 weeks settled into an unexpected rhythm. While Elaine returned to her hospital shifts, I discovered a strange new freedom in being a stranger in a strange city. No one knew me as David's mother or Frank's widow. No one had expectations of me. No one needed anything from me. I explored Elaine's neighborhood, finding a small cafe where I could read for hours undisturbed. I visited museums and bookstores. I walked for miles along the waterfront, the fresh sea air clearing my head in ways I hadn't experienced in decades. In the evenings, Elaine and I cooked together or ordered takeout, talking more openly than we had since her turbulent teenage years. I learned about her life in San Francisco, her challenging but fulfilling work in the trauma center, her close circle of fellow doctors, her on-again, off-again relationship with a neurosurgeon named Malik. Why haven't you mentioned him before? I asked one night over Thai food. She shrugged, pushing noodles around her plate. It's complicated. We work together, which makes things messy. And I'm not sure I want the whole marriage kids package that seems to be the default expectation. You don't have to want that, I said. There's no one right way to build a life. She looked up, surprised. That's not what I expected you to say. You've always been so traditional. I've had some perspective shifts lately, I replied dryly. Nothing like watching your daughter-in-law pack your belongings while calling you dead weight to make you reconsider societal expectations. She laughed, then turned serious. I've been thinking about what you said that first night here, about wanting to matter as yourself, not just as someone's mother or wife. What does that look like for you? What would make Lorelei Thornton happy, just for herself? The question caught me off guard, as it had the first time she'd asked it. What did I want? The concept felt foreign after decades of putting others' needs first. I'm not sure yet, I admitted, but I'm starting to get glimpses. I enjoy this freedom to come and go as I please. I like learning new things without worrying about keeping a household running. I've started sketching again. Did I tell you that? Just little scenes from my walks. I haven't drawn anything since before your father died. Elaine's expression softened. That's beautiful, Mom. And yes, I noticed the sketchbook. You're actually really good. I'm rusty, I demurred. Take the compliment, she insisted, and keep exploring. That's what this time is for. Figure out who Lorelei is beneath all the roles she's played. That night, as I lay on the pull-out sofa listening to the distant sounds of the city, I reflected on how strangely liberating this forced exile had become. The lottery win that had upended my life had also, paradoxically, given me the first real breathing space I'd had in 40 years. The money would come with complications. Christine's lawsuit, media attention, the inevitable requests and expectations from others. But for now, in this suspended moment, I was discovering something I'd forgotten existed. Myself. The call from Ms. Harrington came on a Tuesday morning, 4 weeks into my San Francisco sanctuary. I was sketching the Golden Gate Bridge from a viewpoint in the Presidio, the fog rolling dramatically through its massive spans, when my new secure phone buzzed. "Mrs. Thornton," she began, without preamble. "I have updates on several fronts. First, the good news. The trust has been established and accepted by the Lottery Commission. Your winnings have been transferred to the secure accounts we set up." I exhaled slowly, feeling a weight lift that I hadn't fully acknowledged was there. "And the other situation? That's more complicated," she replied, her tone measured. "Your daughter-in-law's lawsuit has been filed with the county court. As expected, it's frivolous, but we'll need to respond formally. Additionally, her media campaign has escalated." "How so?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "She's given 3 more interviews, each more inflammatory than the last. The most recent one includes allegations that you've had a history of manipulative behavior and financial control over your son." I nearly dropped the phone. "That's absurd. I gave them money for their house down payment." "I know," Ms. Harrington said soothingly, "and we have the documentation to prove it. But in situations like this, emotional narratives can sometimes overpower factual evidence, at least in the court of public opinion. What does this mean for the lawsuit?" "Legally, it changes nothing. Her case remains weak, but she's clearly attempting to pressure you through public sympathy and potential harassment. Have you received any concerning communications?" I thought of the dozens of messages that had flooded my old email and phone before I changed them. Strangers calling me a greedy old woman who was destroying a young couple's marriage, distant acquaintances suddenly expressing concern about my mental health, even a few former neighbors suggesting I should do the right thing and share my winnings. "Some," I admitted, "but I've disconnected from most platforms where people could reach me." "Good. Keep it that way." She paused. "There's one more thing. Your son called our office yesterday. He wanted to formally state for the record that he is not part of his wife's lawsuit and does not support her claims." A small warmth kindled in my chest at this evidence that David was, at least in this matter, choosing the right side. "Thank you for telling me that." After the call ended, I sat on the park bench, my sketching forgotten as I processed this new development. Christine was doubling down, escalating her vendetta against me through both legal and public channels. What had begun as a shock reaction to perceived loss was calcifying into something more dangerous, a deliberate campaign to destroy my reputation and claim money she felt entitled to. That evening, I shared the update with Elaine over dinner. "We should countersue for defamation," she declared immediately, stabbing her fork into her salmon with unnecessary force. "She's publicly lying about you. That's actionable." "More lawsuits mean more publicity," I pointed out. "I just want this to fade away so I can move forward." "It won't fade if she keeps feeding the flames," Elaine argued. "Have you seen the latest?" She pulled out her tablet and navigated to a local news site from back home. "She's got a hashtag now, Justice for Christine. It's trending in your hometown." The image on the screen showed Christine, tearful but photogenic in a modest blue dress, being interviewed in what appeared to be a park near David's house. The headline read, "Lottery Dispute, Tears Family Apart. She took everything from me," says devastated daughter-in-law. "This is surreal," I murmured, skimming the article. According to Christine's latest version of events, I had systematically isolated David from her, criticized her constantly, and used financial leverage to control their lives before finally using the lottery scheme to destroy their marriage. "It's character assassination," Elaine corrected grimly. "And it's working. Look at the comments." I scrolled down, my heart sinking as I read comment after comment, sympathizing with the poor young wife and condemning the greedy mother-in-law who wouldn't share her windfall. "These people don't know me," I said, pushing the tablet away. "They don't know what really happened." "Exactly why you need to tell your side," Elaine insisted. "Not necessarily through the media, but at least through legal channels. Otherwise, her narrative becomes the only one people hear." I considered this, remembering how David had stood silently by while Christine packed my belongings, how he'd suggested a luxury senior community when he thought they were millionaires. The memory still stung, but it had lost some of its sharp edges over the weeks of distance and reflection. "I'll think about it," I promised, "but right now, I need some air." I stepped out onto Elaine's small balcony, gazing at the city lights twinkling below. San Francisco had become an unexpected haven, a place where I could breathe, think, rediscover parts of myself long dormant. The thought of being dragged back into a public battle with Christine, of having my character dissected by strangers, felt like a violation of this newfound peace. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Just saw Christine's latest interview. I'm so sorry, Mom. I've told her to stop, but she won't listen to me anymore. I've spoken to the family lawyer about expediting the divorce." Divorce. The word hung heavy in my mind. Whatever Christine's flaws, whatever pain she'd caused me, I had never intended or wanted to break up my son's marriage. Yet here we were, their 3-year union disintegrating in the aftermath of a lottery ticket that had revealed the cracks already present in their foundation. I texted back, "I'm sorry it's come to this. Are you okay?" His response came quickly. "Not really, but I'm starting to see things more clearly. About Christine, about myself, about what kind of man I want to be." A lump formed in my throat. Despite everything, he was still my son. The baby I'd nursed through colic, the boy whose broken arm I'd held in the emergency room, the teenager whose heart I'd helped mend after his first breakup. I was still contemplating how to respond when another text came through, this one from an unknown number. "You think you're safe hiding in San Francisco? Everyone has a price, Lorelei, even your precious daughter's colleagues. Enjoy your borrowed time. See." The phone nearly slipped from my suddenly numb fingers. How did Christine know where I was? We'd been so careful. Only David knew I was staying with Elaine, and even he didn't have my new contact information or exact location. With shaking hands, I forwarded the message to Elaine, who was still inside. Seconds later, she burst onto the balcony, her face pale. "She knows you're here," she said unnecessarily, staring at the message on my phone. "How the hell does she know you're here?" "Someone must have told her," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fear unfurling in my stomach. "But who?" "You, me, David. We're the only ones who know." Elaine's expression darkened. "Not anymore, apparently." She took my arm, guiding me back inside and locking the balcony door behind us. "Pack your things. We're not staying here tonight." "Elaine, we can't just—" "Mom," she cut me off, her voice deadly serious. "Christine has always been unstable, but now she's tracking you across the country and sending threatening messages. We're not taking chances with your safety." As I mechanically began gathering my belongings, I wondered how it had come to this, fleeing in the night from a woman who had once smiled beside me in family photos, who had exchanged vows with my son in a flower-filled garden ceremony where I had dabbed tears of joy. The lottery ticket hadn't just revealed who Christine was, it had transformed her, or perhaps unleashed something that had been carefully contained beneath her polished exterior, something dangerous. And now that transformation was forcing another change, pushing me out of yet another temporary sanctuary, another place I'd begun to call home. Elaine drove us to Malik's apartment in Pacific Heights, a sleek, modern high-rise with a doorman and security system that she deemed adequate for our impromptu relocation. The neurosurgeon, to his credit, asked no questions when we arrived after midnight with hastily packed bags, simply showed us to his guest room and made up the sofa for himself. "He's a keeper," I whispered to Elaine as he discreetly left us to settle in. "Let's focus on the death threats from your daughter-in-law before we analyze my love life," she replied dryly, though I caught the small smile she tried to suppress. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Elaine called into the hospital, vaguely citing a family emergency to explain her absence. I contacted Ms. Harrington to report Christine's threatening message, which she immediately advised documenting for potential restraining order proceedings. Malik, before leaving for his shift, showed us how to operate his elaborate home security system and promised to alert the building's management about our situation. How did she find us? I wondered aloud, pacing the length of Malik's immaculate living room. David wouldn't have told her. Maybe not intentionally, Elaine replied, her fingers flying over her laptop keyboard as she searched for something. But if she had access to his phone, his email, she trailed off, then sat up straighter. Or his credit card statements. What do you mean? David's been calling you through that secure messaging app I set up, right? The one that requires a subscription? She turned the laptop toward me, showing a credit card statement with a highlighted charge. If they still have joint accounts, she could have seen this charge, Googled what the company does, and figured out he was using it to communicate securely with someone. But that doesn't explain how she knew I was in San Francisco, I pointed out. Elaine grimaced. No, but this might. She pulled up David's social media profile, something I rarely checked, and pointed to a photo posted 3 weeks earlier. It showed David at what appeared to be his office, holding a coffee mug that read, "World's Best Brother," with the Golden Gate Bridge in the background. The caption read, "Missing family today. Some bridges can't be burned, only crossed when you're ready." He was sending me a message, I realized, letting me know he was thinking of me, that he understood I needed space, and inadvertently telling Christine exactly where you might be, Elaine finished grimly. If she knows I live in San Francisco, it wouldn't take a genius to connect the dots. My phone buzzed with a text from Ms. Harrington. Need to speak urgently. Can you talk now? The call that followed brought news that sent my already unsettled world tilting further off its axis. Christine has filed an emergency motion with the court, Ms. Harrington explained, her normally composed voice tight with controlled anger. She's claiming that you're mentally unstable and unfit to manage the lottery winnings, citing your sudden disappearance and erratic behavior as evidence. That's absurd, I sputtered. I'm perfectly sound of mind. Of course you are, she agreed. But she's presenting your departure from town as evidence of paranoid behavior, claiming you've cut off contact with family and friends due to delusions about people coming after your money. I laughed incredulously. She literally sent me a threatening text last night after somehow tracking me to San Francisco. That's not paranoia. That's a reasonable security concern. I know, and we'll present that evidence to the court. But here's where things get complicated. She's convinced a judge to grant a temporary hearing on the matter next week. You'll need to appear in person to contest her claims. The implications hit me like a physical blow. I would have to return home, face Christine directly, submit to questioning about my mental competence in open court. This is a delay tactic, Ms. Harrington continued. Her lawsuit over the lottery winnings is weak, so she's trying another angle. If she can get even a temporary ruling questioning your competence, it could freeze the assets and give her leverage for a settlement. After the call ended, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this latest development. Elaine, who had been listening to my side of the conversation, was incandescent with rage. She's trying to have you declared incompetent? After everything she's done? That manipulative gaslighting? Elaine, I interrupted gently. This isn't helping. She took a deep breath, visibly trying to calm herself. You're right. I'm sorry. I just can't believe she's escalating to this level. I can, I said quietly. She's desperate. The divorce is proceeding. Her public sympathy campaign isn't translating to legal advantage, and she's running out of options. So what now? You're not actually considering going back there, are you? I sighed, feeling the weight of inevitability settling over me. I don't think I have a choice. If I don't appear at this hearing, it only strengthens her claim that I'm behaving erratically. Then I'm coming with you, Elaine declared, her tone brooking no argument. I'll testify about your mental state if necessary. As a physician, my assessment would carry weight. The journey back felt like traveling toward a storm I could see brewing on the horizon. Dark, ominous, unavoidable. We flew under assumed names, booked into a hotel across town from my old neighborhood, and arranged for a private security detail recommended by Ms. Harrington. David met us at the hotel the evening before the hearing, his face drawn with stress and shame. I'm so sorry, he said immediately. I never imagined she'd go this far. The things she's saying about you, the lies, it's unbelievable. Believe it, Elaine said sharply. Your wife is trying to have our mother declared mentally incompetent to get her hands on money that isn't hers. David flinched at her tone, but didn't argue. The divorce papers have been filed. My lawyer is pushing for an expedited process based on Christine's increasingly erratic behavior. Has she threatened you too? I asked, studying his face with concern. He hesitated. Not physically, but she's threatened to destroy me if I testify on your behalf tomorrow. Said she'd tell everyone I was abusive, that I controlled her financially, isolated her from her friends. Would anyone believe that? Elaine asked skeptically. Some might, he admitted. I was never any of those things, but Christine has always been good at presenting herself as sympathetic. And she's convincing when she cries. I reached across the table to take his hand. You don't have to testify, David. Ms. Harrington thinks we have a strong case without putting you in that position. He shook his head firmly. No, Mom. I've already failed you once. I won't do it again. I'll be there tomorrow, telling the truth about what happened. After he left, Elaine and I ordered room service and reviewed our strategy for the hearing one final time. Are you nervous? She asked as we prepared for bed. Terrified, I admitted. Not of Christine or the hearing itself, but of being pulled back into all this ugliness just when I was starting to find some peace. Elaine sat beside me on the edge of the bed. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that this is temporary. Christine can delay things. She can make noise. She can even force you back to town for a hearing. But she can't take away who you are or what you've discovered about yourself these past weeks. I hugged my daughter, grateful beyond words for her fierce support. One way or another, I said, tomorrow this particular chapter ends. I lay awake long after Elaine had fallen asleep, watching shadows play across the unfamiliar hotel ceiling. Tomorrow I would face Christine, the woman who had called me deadweight, who had packed my belongings while telling me I was unwanted, who was now attempting to have me declared incompetent to manage my own affairs. Strangely, beneath the anxiety and indignation, I found a core of calm resolve that hadn't been there 6 weeks ago when I'd fled town. The Lorelei who had left had been shocked, hurt, and unmoored by betrayal. The Lorelei returning tomorrow had begun to rediscover her strength, her voice, her worth beyond what she could give to others. Christine might have forced this confrontation, but she would not find the same woman she had thrown out of her home that fateful morning. For better or worse, that woman no longer existed. The county courthouse loomed before us, its stone facade austere against the clear morning sky. Elaine and I arrived an hour early on Ms. Harrington's advice, slipping in through a side entrance to avoid the small cluster of reporters gathered on the main steps. Vultures, Elaine muttered, as we were escorted to a private waiting room. How did they even know about this hearing? Court schedules are public record, Ms. Harrington replied, joining us with a sleek leather portfolio tucked under her arm. And unfortunately, Christine has been quite effective at generating media interest in your case. I smoothed my navy suit, purchased just yesterday at a boutique near our hotel, chosen specifically for its conservative cut and dignified appearance. Image shouldn't matter in a legal proceeding, but we all knew it did. What should I expect? I asked, my mouth dry despite the water I'd been sipping steadily all morning. Judge Montgomery is fair but direct, Ms. Harrington explained. She doesn't tolerate theatrics or obvious manipulation. Christine's attorney will present their case first, likely focusing on your sudden disappearance and erratic behavior after winning the lottery. They'll try to paint you as paranoid and unstable. And our response? We present you as you are, a rational woman who temporarily relocated after experiencing genuine harassment following a lottery win. We have the threatening text messages, documentation of the media frenzy that followed the leak, and of course, Elaine's testimony as both your daughter and a medical professional regarding your mental state. The door opened, and David slipped in, looking uncomfortable in a suit that hung slightly loose on his frame. He'd lost weight in the weeks since I'd left town. They're here, he said without preamble. Christine and her lawyer just arrived. He hesitated. She's giving some kind of statement to the reporters outside. Ms. Harrington's expression tightened. As expected, she's playing to the court of public opinion. We'll focus on the actual court. At precisely 10 a.m., we were led into the courtroom. It was smaller than I'd imagined, with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lighting that cast everyone in an unflattering pallor. Christine sat at the plaintiff's table, dressed in a demure gray dress with her hair pulled back in a simple knot, the picture of a concerned, wronged young woman. When she saw me, her expression flickered briefly, surprise perhaps that I had actually returned to face her, before settling back into practiced solemnity. Beside her sat a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit, who I assumed was her attorney. The proceedings began with the judge reviewing the petition. Christine's attorney, Mr. Delaney, rose to present their case. Your Honor, this is a deeply troubling situation involving an elderly woman who has experienced a significant psychological break following a large lottery win, he began, his voice oozing concern. Mrs. Thornton, who previously displayed no signs of financial acumen, suddenly disappeared after winning $60 million, cutting off contact with family and behaving in increasingly paranoid ways. I felt Elaine stiffen beside me at the word elderly, but Ms. Harrington placed a calming hand on her arm. The petitioner, Mrs. Christine Thornton, is simply concerned for her mother-in-law's well-being and the proper management of these substantial funds, he continued. We believe temporary conservatorship is appropriate while Mrs. Thornton undergoes proper psychological evaluation. As he spoke, Christine dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, the perfect image of distress. I wondered abstractly how many times she had practiced that gesture in front of a mirror. When it was our turn, Ms. Harrington approached the bench with composed confidence. Your Honor, the claims before you today represent not concern for Mrs. Lorelei Thornton's well-being, but rather a calculated attempt to gain control over lottery winnings that rightfully belong to her alone, she stated firmly. Far from experiencing a psychological break, Mrs. Thornton made perfectly rational decisions to protect herself after being subjected to threatening behavior from the petitioner herself. She presented the text messages Christine had sent, including the threatening one that had driven us from Elaine's apartment. She detailed the media frenzy that had erupted after someone close to the family leaked private information about the lottery win. And most devastatingly, she called David to testify about what had really happened the morning after the lottery numbers were announced. David approached the witness stand, visibly nervous but determined. Under Ms. Harrington's gentle questioning, he recounted that terrible morning, Christine's elation at thinking they'd won, her vicious verbal attack when she believed they no longer needed me, the packing of my belongings, the suggestion of a senior living facility. And was your mother displaying any signs of mental instability during this event? Ms. Harrington asked. No, David replied firmly. She was understandably hurt and shocked, but completely lucid, much more composed than I would have been in her position. When Christine's lawyer cross-examined him, attempting to suggest he was testifying under duress or out of guilt, David remained steady. I'm here because it's the truth, he said simply. I failed my mother once by not defending her when she needed me. I won't fail her again by staying silent while false accusations are made against her. Elaine's testimony followed, providing both personal observation and professional medical opinion about my mental competence. Finally, it was my turn to take the stand. As I was sworn in, I looked directly at Christine for the first time. Behind her practiced expression of concern, I glimpsed something else, a cold calculation, a simmering anger that no amount of demure clothing or carefully applied makeup could fully conceal. Ms. Harrington's questions were straightforward, allowing me to explain in my own words why I had temporarily relocated, how I had maintained contact with my son throughout, and the steps I had taken to responsibly manage my lottery winnings through proper legal and financial channels. Then it was Mr. Delaney's turn. He approached with the smooth confidence of a man accustomed to intimidating witnesses, particularly, I suspected, older women. Mrs. Thornton, he began, would you say it's normal behavior for a woman of your age to suddenly abandon her home and family after coming into money? I didn't abandon anyone, I replied calmly. I removed myself from a hostile environment after being literally thrown out of my son's home by his wife, the same woman who is now claiming concern for my well-being. He frowned slightly at my composed response. Yet you fled across the country without telling anyone where you were going. Doesn't that suggest paranoid thinking? No, it suggests prudent caution. When someone packs your belongings while calling you dead weight, then tracks you to another city and sends threatening messages, maintaining privacy seems quite rational. As the questioning continued, I remained steady, neither rising to his provocations nor allowing him to twist my words. The weeks in San Francisco had given me something precious, perspective, and the quiet confidence that comes from rediscovering one's own worth. When Mr. Delaney finally ran out of angles to pursue, the judge called a brief recess before issuing her ruling. In the hallway outside, Ms. Harrington squeezed my hand. You were excellent, she said. Clear, composed, rational, exactly what we needed to demonstrate. She's going to lose, isn't she? David asked, glancing toward the conference room where Christine and her attorney had sequestered themselves. Most likely, Ms. Harrington confirmed. Judge Montgomery doesn't suffer fools or obvious manipulation. I expect she'll not only dismiss the petition, but possibly issue a warning about frivolous filings. When court resumed 30 minutes later, Judge Montgomery's expression was stern as she delivered her ruling. Having reviewed the evidence and testimony presented, this court finds no basis whatsoever for the petition for conservatorship. Mrs. Lorelei Thornton has demonstrated clear mental competence and rational decision-making throughout these proceedings and in her actions following her lottery win. Christine's face hardened as the judge continued. Furthermore, this court is troubled by what appears to be a pattern of harassment directed at Mrs. Thornton, followed by legal maneuvers seemingly designed to gain control over her financial assets. The petitioner is advised that any further filings of this nature may result in sanctions. As we exited the courtroom, I felt a curious lightness, not triumph or vindication, but simply relief that this particular battle was over. In the corridor, Christine stood alone, her attorney already departing with a brief, terse comment about exploring other options. Our eyes met across the polished floor. For a moment, her mask slipped completely, revealing the raw fury beneath. Then she turned on her heel and strode away, the sharp click of her heels echoing off the marble walls like distant gunfire. "It's over," David said, watching her go. But something in her rigid posture, in the calculated glance she'd thrown over her shoulder as she disappeared around the corner, told me it wasn't. Not quite yet. The victory in court provided a foundation, but not a conclusion. In the days that followed, I remained in town at the hotel, working with Ms. Harrington to finalize the trust arrangements and address the remaining legal entanglements Christine had created. The good news, Ms. Harrington reported during our meeting 3 days after the hearing, is that her main lawsuit over the lottery winnings is losing momentum. After Judge Montgomery's ruling and comments, Christine's attorney has proposed settlement discussions. "What kind of settlement?" I asked warily. "A nuisance settlement. Essentially, a small payment to make her go away." She adjusted her glasses. "I don't recommend it. Giving her anything could be interpreted as legitimizing her claims." "I agree," I said firmly. "No settlements." David, who had been attending these meetings with my permission, nodded in agreement. "She doesn't deserve a penny." His divorce proceedings were advancing, though not without complications. Christine had contested everything possible, from the division of assets to ownership of items David had owned before their marriage. Her latest demand, that she receive the house I had helped them purchase, seemed designed more to hurt than to secure actual benefit. "She knows how much that house means to both of us," David explained over dinner that evening with Elaine and me. "It's not about the property value, it's about taking something she knows matters." "Let her have it," I suggested, surprising both of them. Some battles aren't worth fighting, especially when they're over symbols rather than substance. David looked uncertain. "But Mom, you sold your home to help with the down payment. Your home, where we grew up." "Exactly," I said gently. "It was just a house, David. The memories, the meaning, those go with us. Christine can have the building. She can't take what it represents." Later that night, as Elaine and I prepared for bed in our shared hotel room, she studied me with the thoughtful expression that meant she was analyzing something. "You're different," she finally said. "Not just since the lottery, but since San Francisco. More, I don't know, centered somehow." I considered this as I applied moisturizer to my face, a small luxury ritual I'd adopted recently. I think I found parts of myself I'd forgotten existed, or maybe never knew were there. Like what? Like the woman who can walk alone through a strange city without fear. The woman who can stand up in court and speak her truth without apologizing. The woman who can set boundaries without feeling guilty. I met her eyes in the mirror. The woman who exists outside of what she gives to others. Elaine smiled, a hint of pride in her expression. "I like her. She should stick around." The next morning brought an unexpected development. As I sipped coffee in the hotel restaurant, mentally planning the day ahead, my phone buzzed with a text from David. "Christine's gone." "What do you mean, gone?" I asked when he arrived at the hotel 20 minutes later, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. "Just gone." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I went by the house to pick up some documents my lawyer needed, and it was empty. Half the furniture missing, her clothes gone, even pictures removed from the walls. The neighbors said they saw a moving truck yesterday while I was at work." Ms. Harrington, whom I called immediately, was less surprised. Not uncommon when someone realizes they've overplayed their hand legally. "She's cutting her losses. Should we be concerned?" I asked. "About her coming back or trying something else?" I think she's done, Ms. Harrington said confidently. The court's rebuke was quite public, and her remaining lawsuit is weak. Sometimes people like Christine, when faced with actual consequences for their actions, simply move on to easier targets. By the end of the week, we had confirmation. Christine had relocated to Arizona near her parents' retirement community. Her attorney filed for withdrawal from the lottery lawsuit, effectively ending the legal threat. So that's it? Elaine asked, as we celebrated with a quiet dinner at a restaurant far from the media's lingering attention. She just gives up and disappears? People like Christine don't change their nature, I replied, thinking of the calculating look I'd seen in her eyes that day in court. But they do recalculate when the odds shift against them. She'll find another path, another target. I'm just grateful it's no longer us. With the immediate threat resolved, the question of what came next hung unspoken between us. Elaine needed to return to her patients in San Francisco. David was rebuilding his life in the aftermath of his collapsing marriage. And I was untethered in a way both terrifying and exhilarating. Have you thought about what you want to do? David asked hesitantly over dessert. Now that everything's settling down? You could stay here, of course. I could help you find a new place. Actually, I interrupted gently, I've been thinking about that, and I don't think I'm going to settle here again. Both of my children stared at me with identical expressions of surprise. But this is your home, David protested. Your friends are here. Your whole life was here, I corrected. But I'm not the same person who left 6 weeks ago, David. That Lorelei was defined by her roles: mother, mother-in-law, community volunteer. This Lorelei is still discovering who she is. So where will you go? Elaine asked, her expression shifting from surprise to thoughtful consideration. I'm not entirely sure yet. I thought I might travel for a while, see some of the places I've always dreamed about. Paris in the spring, the Italian countryside in summer, maybe spend some time near you in San Francisco, and sometime here when David needs me. When I need you? David echoed, his voice catching. Mom, after everything that happened, how I failed you, I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to see me again. I reached across the table to take his hand. You made a mistake, David. A painful, hurtful mistake. But in the aftermath, you've shown real remorse and growth. I'm proud of how you've handled yourself these past weeks. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't about deserving, I told him. It's about choosing to move forward, unburdened by anger that only hurts the person carrying it. I forgive you not because you earned it, but because I don't want that weight in my heart anymore. The weeks that followed brought rapid changes. With Ms. Harrington's help, I established a foundation that would support causes close to my heart: educational opportunities for single parents, housing security for vulnerable seniors, arts programs in underserved communities. I purchased a modest but beautiful condo in San Francisco's North Beach neighborhood, a home base between travels and conveniently close to Elaine. David flew out to help me settle in, spending a week assembling furniture, hanging artwork, and rebuilding our relationship conversation by conversation. On his last evening before flying home, we sat on my new balcony overlooking the bay, sharing a bottle of wine as the sun set. Are you happy, Mom? He asked suddenly. I considered the question carefully, watching the fading light gild the water in shades of gold and amber. I'm becoming happy, I said finally. I'm learning what that means for me, on my own terms. I'm glad, he said softly. You deserve it. You always have. As he left the next morning, I handed him an envelope, not unlike the one I'd given him that fateful day when everything changed. What's this? He asked, hesitating to open it. Just a small gift, I said, for when you're ready. Inside was information about an educational trust I'd established for his future children, should he choose to have them, and a letter expressing my hope for his future, my faith in the man he was becoming, and my unconditional but clear-eyed love. 3 months after winning the lottery that had both shattered and reconstituted my life, I boarded a plane to Paris, my first stop on a journey with no fixed endpoint. As the aircraft lifted into the clouds, I thought about the strange alchemy that had transformed a devastating betrayal into a catalyst for liberation. The lottery hadn't really changed me. It had simply revealed what was already there: Christine's latent cruelty, David's moral weaknesses, my own long-suppressed strength and capacity for self-determination. Money reveals people. I had told David weeks ago. But it wasn't just about revealing others. It was about revealing ourselves, our values, our boundaries, our capacity for growth and change. Christine had revealed her true nature when she thought she had won. David had revealed his weaknesses, but also his capacity for growth and accountability in the aftermath. And I had revealed, perhaps most surprisingly to myself, that beneath decades of self-effacement and accommodation lay a woman of remarkable resilience and untapped potential. $60 million hadn't bought my happiness, but it had purchased the freedom to discover it on my own terms, a journey worth far more than the winning ticket that had started it all. 5 years can change everything, or nothing at all. In my case, it was somewhere in between. Paris led to Rome, which led to a small village in Tuscany where I rented a stone cottage for 3 months and rediscovered my love of painting. Florence in autumn gave way to Barcelona in winter, then a springtime sojourn along the coast of Portugal. I filled sketchbooks with watercolors, journals with observations, and my once cautious heart with experiences I'd deferred for decades. I wasn't running from my past, but rather running toward a future I'd never dared imagine. One where Lorelei Thornton existed primarily for herself, her own joys and discoveries, rather than in relation to others' needs. The irony wasn't lost on me that it had taken Christine's cruelty to catalyze this transformation. Sometimes our greatest gifts come wrapped in our most painful experiences. On this particular morning, exactly 5 years since that fateful lottery drawing, I sat on the terrace of my San Francisco condo, watching fog roll through the Golden Gate Bridge while waiting for my guests to arrive. At 72, I'd settled into a rhythm that suited me. 6 months of travel each year, interspersed with time in my 2 permanent homes, this light-filled space near Elaine, and a smaller apartment back in my hometown where I could be close to David when I chose to be. The doorbell rang precisely at 11. Elaine, punctual as always. "Happy lotteryversary," she called out as I opened the door, presenting me with a small blue gift bag. Behind her stood Malik, now her husband of 3 years, carrying a bottle of champagne. "Is that what we're calling it now?" I laughed, accepting both the gift and her warm embrace. 5 years since Mom's great awakening deserves a name, she insisted, following me into the living room. "We're celebrating your rebirth, not just a winning ticket." The gift bag contained a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a butterfly, a fitting symbol for the metamorphosis I'd undergone. "It's beautiful," I said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness. "The champagne is technically from both of us," Malik added with a wink, "but the sentiment is all Elaine." We were arranging glasses on the coffee table when the doorbell rang again. This time it was David, accompanied by his fiancée Rachel, a kind, straightforward librarian he'd met 2 years after his divorce was finalized. "Sorry we're late," Rachel apologized, handing me a bouquet of peonies, my favorite. "Someone insisted on stopping for those bagels you like from that place on Baker Street." "Worth it," David declared, holding up a paper bag that indeed emitted the unmistakable scent of my favorite sesame bagels. "Happy anniversary, Mom." As we settled around the living room with champagne and bagels, I studied my small family circle with quiet contentment. Elaine had mellowed slightly with marriage, though she remained fiercely protective and brutally honest when necessary. Malik complemented her intensity with his steady calm, their partnership a balance of passion and peace. David had undergone the most profound transformation. The painful crucible of Christine's betrayal and the dissolution of their marriage had forced him to confront his own weaknesses, his conflict avoidance, his susceptibility to manipulation, his occasional moral cowardice. The man who sat beside Rachel now was more grounded, more principled, with a quiet strength that reminded me of his father in our best years together. "Any news from the Christine front?" Elaine asked, never one to shy away from difficult topics. David shook his head. "Nothing in over a year. Last I heard she'd remarried, some real estate developer in Scottsdale. Poor guy probably has no idea what he's in for. Or maybe he's cut from the same cloth," Rachel suggested. "Some people find exactly the partners they deserve." The conversation drifted to happier topics. Elaine's recent promotion to department head, David and Rachel's upcoming wedding, my plans for a summer in Greece. The bitter events that had initially fractured our family had ultimately, strangely, strengthened the bonds between those of us who remained. "I have news," I announced as we finished our champagne. "I've decided what to do with the foundation." The Thornton Foundation, established with a significant portion of my lottery winnings, had been funding various causes close to my heart for 5 years. Recently, I'd been considering a more focused direction for its future. "I'm creating a special initiative for senior women facing housing insecurity or financial exploitation," I explained, "particularly those who find themselves vulnerable after decades of prioritizing family over financial independence." "That's perfect," Elaine said warmly. "Helping others avoid the situation you nearly found yourself in. Or helping them find their way out if they're already there," David added, "giving them the support system you built for yourself." After everyone left, I took my afternoon walk along the waterfront, reflecting on the strange journey that had brought me here. 5 years ago today, I'd checked lottery numbers in the middle of the night, discovering a win that would change everything, though not in any way I could have anticipated. I remembered sitting alone in that hotel room after being thrown out of David's house, the raw pain of betrayal still fresh, wondering what would become of me. If I could have glimpsed this future then, the adventures I'd have, the confidence I'd develop, the peaceful self-possession I'd cultivate, I might not have believed it possible. Near Fisherman's Wharf, I passed an older woman sitting alone on a bench, staring out at the bay with an expression of such lost desolation that it stopped me in my tracks. Something in her posture, the slight curve of defeated shoulders, the hands clasped too tightly in her lap, reminded me viscerally of myself from 5 years ago. I sat beside her, offering a simple greeting. She startled slightly, as if unaccustomed to being noticed. "Beautiful view," I commented, giving her space to respond or not. "I suppose," she replied after a moment. "I'm not really seeing it today." We sat in companionable silence for a while before she volunteered. "My husband left last week, after 42 years, for his yoga instructor." She gave a hollow laugh. "Cliché, isn't it? I should have seen it coming." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it deeply. "That kind of betrayal is devastating." She looked at me then, really looked, perhaps recognizing a kindred spirit. "Everyone keeps saying I'll be fine, that it's a chance for a fresh start. But I'm 64. Who starts fresh at 64? I smiled, not with condescension, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had walked through fire and emerged transformed. "I did, at 67. Her eyebrows rose in surprise. "Really? Really?" I confirmed. "And it was terrifying and painful and eventually the most liberating thing that ever happened to me." We talked for nearly an hour. I didn't tell her about the lottery. That wasn't the important part of my story anyway. I told her about rediscovering my passion for art, about traveling solo through countries I'd only dreamed of visiting, about learning that it's never too late to define yourself on your own terms. Before we parted, I gave her my card with the foundation's information. "When you're ready," I said, "we have resources that might help: financial counseling, housing assistance, legal advice, and just people who understand what you're going through." "Thank you," she said, tucking the card carefully into her purse, "for everything." As I continued my walk home, I thought about the perfect symmetry of that encounter, how 5 years to the day after my life had been shattered and remade, I could extend a hand to someone standing at the same precipice. The lottery ticket had revealed Christine's true nature and catalyzed my transformation. But the real winning ticket had been the one I'd written for myself in the aftermath: the permission to prioritize my own joy, to establish clear boundaries, to create a life that honored my worth, independent of what I could give to others. That was a jackpot anyone could claim, with or without $60 million. And sharing that particular winning ticket was perhaps the most meaningful way to mark this strange, beautiful anniversary of the day everything changed.
ちょろねちょろねちょろちょろマジろこれ動けおかしいおかしいおかしいおかしいおかしいおかしいウルトこんなとこで使ってんじゃねえぞこのさスモーク使ったの誰マジで本当に言いづらかった下手くそだなスモークの使い方ガチに敵スモークやあれ暴れろお前これそれ壊れないのこれボクシー何回も言ったらいけるだろ何回も言うそういけるあレス一人なラスト一人暴れてこい暴れる一人は取れよ別に絶対取れよ若い子するんだよ一人は絶対打ち合い見せろ勝てばいいあるはず勝てばいいんだろ 1v3 クラッチ余裕だろ暴れろうわー緊張してきたさあどうする俺勝てるでしょ絶対まず芋からのなんか落下しグレネード投げてはいグレードそれ降りちゃうのそれ降りたらどう考えてもダメでしょなんで降りたらさっき見すぎもたち見すぎやな何してんのびっくりしたよ降りないで上からまずなんで会場も聞けばよかったじゃん会場やってない一人やった下手っすやっても一人やったよだって降りたら負けるの分かってたよ今の初めて上からまずやるでしょ今の降りるマジかてかグレもなんか雑投げしたし絶頂聞いてから別に雑投げだよ設置本聞いてから投げればもうレンジャーもうやめな当たんないからやめなレンジャー当たんないからやめなレンジャー当たんないよ当たってるとこ見たことないから今何から車線通らないところまでもう入り込まれてましたよだからそこをグレでこうじゃんけどって言ってんだよそうねいやー死んでますよそれ以前にしっかりね隠してんだから一郎いやもうこれ毎回思うんだよねこれ集まってファームしないかってホワイトベール賞とかどうすか集まってますよビビってるよ嫌いになったらついてきて怖いからって言います別に大丈夫なんで来なくて大丈夫っすよ怖いからって言い大丈夫ですよ来なくて